Hello, this is the Unknown Files podcast, and I'm your host. We discuss cases that official reports categorize as unresolved, yet whose details continue to haunt us. Today's story is one such case. It begins in Yellowstone and ends with questions that remain unanswered to this day. It is a story about how, in the wildest corners of our country, you can encounter not just danger, but something for which we don't even have a name. In July 2022, firefighters discovered the body of a tourist on top of a cliff that no human could have climbed. At the foot of the cliff were traces that no known animal could have left behind. Let's start with the facts recorded in official documents. July 2022, Yellowstone National Park. It was the height of the season. Tourists, crowded campsites, rangers working themselves to exhaustion. Among the thousands of visitors was Bradley Collins, a 34-year-old software engineer from Denver, Colorado. Brad was no novice. His social media was full of photos from hikes in the Rocky Mountains, and he was in good shape and had all the necessary gear. For him, hiking in Yellowstone was not a challenge, but rather an active vacation, a chance to disconnect from the hustle and bustle of the city. He registered his route as required. A 4-day solo hike on the Lamar River Trail, one of the wildest and least visited areas of the park, known for its vast meadows and populations of bison and wolves. On July 12th, he sent his sister a final message, a short video of the valley with the caption, "It's incredible here. I'll be in touch in a couple of days." After that, all contact with him was lost. When Brad did not emerge from the trail on the appointed date, July 16th, his sister notified park authorities. A standard search and rescue operation began. Rangers and volunteers combed the area, while helicopters surveyed the territory from the air. The initial theories were standard: lost, injured, fallen into a river, or encountered a grizzly bear. Yellowstone is 2 million acres of wilderness. It's easy to disappear forever here. The search went on for 3 days with no results, no broken branches, no abandoned gear, no signs of a struggle. Brad Collins had vanished. Then, on July 19th, 6 miles south of Collins' last known location, an incident unrelated to the search occurred: a dry thunderstorm. Lightning struck an old pine tree on top of a rocky outcrop, causing a local fire. Due to the inaccessibility of the area, an exceptional team of forest firefighters was called in. Smoke jumpers, parachutists who land directly on the source of the fire. They successfully extinguished the fire, and the next day, July 20th, a small group of 3 people carried out the standard procedure, dousing and clearing the area to make sure there were no smoldering embers. The site was the top of a freestanding rock that locals call Eagle's Nest. It is about 150 feet high, with almost vertical walls. It is impossible to climb up there without special climbing equipment, and it was there, on a scorched patch of land among charred bushes, that the firefighters made their discovery. It was a human body. It was lying on its back, arms outstretched. The identity was quickly established from dental records and the remains of documents in a partially melted wallet. It was Brad Collins, but the circumstances of his discovery immediately raised questions. First, how did he get there? 6 miles across rough terrain from his route, and on top of a cliff that required rock climbing skills. His backpack and gear were never found. Second, the condition of the body itself. According to the coroner's report, which was later leaked to the press by a source in the local police department, the picture was extraordinary. The lower part of Collins' body, from the waist down, was virtually untouched by fire. His hiking boots and pants were covered in soot but not burned. However, the upper part, from the chest to the head, was badly charred. The examination revealed that he had been exposed to extremely high temperatures, primarily from above and in front. It did not look like someone who had been caught in the epicenter of a forest fire. But the most disturbing part was something else. The autopsy report we received contains details that were omitted from the official press releases. Brad Collins had both shoulder bones and collarbones broken. The nature of the fractures, as indicated by the pathologist, suggested that tremendous compressive force had been applied from both sides, as if his chest had been crushed in a giant vice. Forces many times greater than those of a human being. There were no signs of a struggle, scratches, or animal bites on the body. The cause of death was listed as cardiac arrest caused by shock and trauma even before the fire. In other words, he was killed first, and then his body ended up on top of this cliff for some reason, where it was caught by a lightning strike. The Park Service and the Park County Sheriff's Office were at a dead end. The accident theory fell apart. The criminal theory also did not stand up to scrutiny. Brad had no enemies. There was no motive for robbery. His expensive watch and the rest of his cash were with him. But how to explain his movement and injuries? And how did the body end up on top of Eagle's Nest? Rangers thoroughly examined the rock. There were no signs of climbing, no hooks left behind, no rope marks on the rocks, no broken branches on the rare ledges. Nothing. It was as if the body had fallen from the sky. This version was absurd, of course, but there were no other logical explanations. The investigation had stalled before it had even begun. The case was in danger of becoming another cold case, another tragic and inexplicable story from the wilderness. But then, during a final inspection of the area at the foot of the cliff, one of the investigators, a young sheriff's deputy named Ben Carter, noticed something in the mud that had dried after the rain. What he found changed everything. They were footprints, a pair of clear, deep imprints of bare feet. But they weren't human feet. According to the official measurement report, each footprint was 22 inches long, almost 56 centimeters. The width at the heel was 9.5 inches, about 24 centimeters. Judging by the depth of the prints in the dense soil, the expert traceologist called into the case made a preliminary calculation. The creature that left them must have weighed at least 800 pounds, or about 360 kilograms. The footprints were five-toed, resembling human footprints in structure, but the proportions were completely different. And one more detail, recorded in the report and confirmed by photographs from the scene. On one of the toes, on the pad, there was a pattern clearly visible, similar to human papillary lines, as on a fingerprint. But there was no claw or nail on this toe, just bare skin. The traces led from the edge of the forest to the foot of the cliff and ended there. There were no other traces, no drag marks, no signs of a struggle, no blood, anywhere nearby. Only two giant footprints faced the top of the cliff where Brad Collins' body lay. The discovery of these footprints instantly transformed the case from a tragic accident into something else entirely. The park administration imposed a news blackout. The official comment to the press was as vague as possible. The investigation into the circumstances of the tourist's death is ongoing, and all possibilities are being considered. Not a word was said about the footprints. A source in the sheriff's office later told us that on the same day, a group of people in plain clothes arrived in Yellowstone, introducing themselves as specialists from a federal agency, the name of which he did not remember. They seized the plaster casts made from the footprints, all photographic materials, and the inspection reports. Local investigators were strongly advised not to comment on the matter. The official report, released several weeks later, was the height of bureaucratic acrobatics. The cause of Brad Collins' death was listed as accidental exposure to high temperatures during a forest fire. The reason why his body ended up on an inaccessible cliff 6 miles from his route was listed as unknown. There was no mention of broken shoulders or a crushed rib cage. the case was closed, but information had already leaked out. Deputy Sheriff Ben Carter, who made the discovery, was a young and conscientious man. He was shocked not so much by the evidence as by the subsequent reaction of the authorities. A few months later, he quit and moved to another state. Before leaving, he shared the story with a local freelance journalist who became our initial source. According to Carter, in the days following the discovery, there was an atmosphere of fear and confusion among the rangers and police. Old rumors, usually told around campfires to scare newcomers, suddenly took on a sinister reality. Stories of hairy people who were allegedly seen from time to time in the most remote corners of the park. Unofficial statistics on missing persons which, according to rumors, differed significantly from the official figures. We initiated our own investigation to identify other similar cases in Yellowstone's history, and we found them. Local newspaper archives from neighboring towns in Montana and Wyoming are full of stories that, when taken individually, seem like mere accidents. But when you put them together, a disturbing picture emerges. The year is 1988. An experienced geologist goes missing, his car found in a parking lot at the trailhead. The search turns up nothing. 1997. 2 moose hunters went into the woods and never returned. Their tents and food were found untouched at their campsite, but their rifles lay on the ground with the stocks broken in half. The force required to break a hard walnut woodstock is enormous. In 2005, a female photographer specializing in wildlife photography disappeared in the Shuoshang Geyser Basin area. Her camera was found a year later in a stream. The memory card survived. The last pictures were a series of blurry, panicked photos of a dark, massive silhouette moving between the trees. The quality was too poor for identification, and the authorities dismissed it as a trick of light and shadow. New information also came to light from a ranger named Jim Davis, who had worked in Yellowstone for over 30 years. He agreed to talk to us on condition of anonymity. His story added new and frightening details. According to him, there is an unofficial protocol for rangers working in the backcountry. Suppose they find giant footprints that look like human ones. In that case, they are instructed not to record them in official reports, but to report the find to their immediate superiors via an encrypted channel. After that, a special research team arrives at the site to do further work. Davis claimed that he had encountered similar findings 3 times in his career. In one case in the early 1990s, he found not only footprints, but also the remains of a deer. The animal had been torn apart with incredible force, and its spine was broken like a matchstick. But the strangest thing was that the carcass had not been eaten. It had been torn apart and left there. This is not the behavior of any known predator. Bears or wolves always eat their prey. Davis also told a story that explains why Brad Collins could have ended up on top of the cliff. In 1982, while still a young ranger, he took part in a search for a missing tourist. They found his camp completely destroyed. The tent was torn to shreds, and the metal poles of the frame were bent at impossible angles. The tourist himself was nowhere to be found. Nowhere. But 100 yards from the camp, on a branch of a tall pine tree, about 40 feet above the ground, hung his sleeping bag. It had been thrown there with such force that the branch cracked under its weight. Davis suggested that the creature they unofficially called the Master of the Forest sometimes demonstrated its strength by throwing objects or even its victims to great heights. Perhaps this was territorial behavior, a way of marking its territory, or simply a manifestation of a cruel logic that we cannot understand. The top of the cliff could have been such a mark for Brad Collins. The creature that killed him simply threw his body where no one would find it. The lightning strike and subsequent fire were a tragic accident that uncovered this terrible mystery. The information we received from Davis made us look at the Collins case from a different angle. We stopped looking for logic in the actions of a maniac or a predator. We were faced with something that operates according to its own laws, alien to us. We tried to find other witnesses. We managed to track down one of the firefighters who was in the group that saw the body. He no longer works for the department and agreed to talk, also asking that his name not be used. He confirmed all the details: the inaccessibility of the cliff, the strange condition of the body. But he added something else. On the night before, they were dropped off at the fire site. While they were at a temporary camp a few miles away, he heard strange noises. It wasn't a wolf howling or a bear roaring. It was a deep, guttural cry, full of rage and pain that seemed to shake the ground. The sound was so powerful and low frequency that he could feel it vibrating through his chest. Other firefighters heard it too, but in the morning they dismissed it as fatigue and acoustic illusions in the mountains. But after finding the body on the cliff, he realized that the sound was connected to the tragedy that had occurred. It was the cry of the person who had left the footprints at the foot of the cliff. Our next step was risky. We had to go back to the original source, Brad Collins' sister, Amanda. At first, she refused to talk, tired of the media attention and the authorities' inaction. But when we presented her with the information we had gathered about the footprints, Ranger Davis's testimony, similar cases in the past, she agreed to meet with us. Amanda told us things she hadn't said to the investigators because she thought they were unimportant or too strange. A few weeks before the trip, Brad had become obsessed. He spent hours on specialized forums for tourists and wildlife enthusiasts, reading reports about trips to Yellowstone, but he wasn't interested in beautiful views or popular routes. He was looking for mentions of strange encounters, unexplained sounds, and anomalous zones. Amanda showed us his laptop. The browser history contained dozens of links to half-forgotten blogs, digitized newspaper clippings, and forum discussions dedicated to cryptozoology. Brad had been purposefully gathering information about the Yellowstone hairy man, a local variation on the Bigfoot legend, but he wasn't treating it as a hobby. As an engineer, he was trying to systematize the data. He mapped the locations where the creature had allegedly been seen or traces found, and compared the time of year and weather conditions. His route along the Lamar River Trail passed through the area with the highest concentration of such marks. Brad Collins didn't go to Yellowstone to relax. He went there on a quest. He was looking for confirmation, and it seems he found it. His last message to his sister wasn't just a panorama of the valley. Attached to it was a 10-second audio file, which Amanda didn't listen to right away, putting it off for later. She played it for us. The recording was made on a phone voice recorder, and the quality was poor. There was the sound of wind and branches crackling underfoot. And then, in the background, there was a sound. Deep, drawn out, like a moan or a growl, but not belonging to any known animal. The sound was threatening. And then the recording cut off. Brad didn't just stumble upon this creature by accident. He had been tracking it, and at some point, the hunter became the hunted. That changed everything. His death was not a random attack. It was a reaction to an intrusion. Armed with this information, we tried to contact Dr. Anya Sharma, the pathologist who performed the autopsy. Finding her proved difficult. She had resigned from the county medical examiner's office and moved to a private lab in another state. After much persuasion, she agreed to a brief off-the-record conversation. She confirmed our worst suspicions. Brad Collins' injuries were so unusual that she sent samples of his bone tissue for additional analysis to a specialized institute. The results never came back to her. She was told that the materials had been seized for further study by federal authorities. But before they were sent, she managed to conduct her own microscopic analysis. On the surface of the broken shoulder bones, she found microscopic particles of organic material. It was not wool or hair. She described it as tiny, splinter-like fragments of something resembling very rough and thick skin, or cuticle, like that of an insect, but with the organic structure of vertebrate tissue. She uttered a phrase we will never forget. It was as if it had been squeezed by something alive, but with the hardness of stone. Putting it all together, Brad's focused search, the audio recording, the statements from the rangers and firefighters, the autopsy details, the seizure of materials and evidence by the feds. We got a picture of a deliberate cover-up. The authorities know that something lives in Yellowstone, something significant, substantial, and highly aggressive when defending its territory. A creature that is smart enough to avoid humans but will not hesitate to eliminate a threat if provoked. Official recognition of its existence would cause panic, the closure of the largest national park, and economic collapse for the entire region. It's easier to write off isolated incidents as accidents and hide the evidence under a classified label. Our story ends where it began, in Yellowstone. We don't know what this creature is. Is it a relict hominid that survived in isolation, or a product of an unknown branch of evolution? We know only one thing. It is real, and it killed Brad Collins. It grabbed him, crushed his chest, carried his body 6 miles away, and threw it on top of a cliff as a warning to everyone else. The lightning fire was just a coincidence that shed light on this darkness. The Collins family never got any answers. The official story remains unchanged, and somewhere in the wildest corners of Yellowstone, far from the tourist trails, there are still sounds that no human should hear, and there are traces that no beast should leave behind. The story of Brad Collins is not just a tragedy. It is a reminder that there are still blank spots on the map of the world, and sometimes, when you venture into them, you may never return.